Welcome to the Louchen Brothers podcast. This show is hosted by Brian Louchen
and Kevin Louchen,
and we are bros who talk about nerd stuff. We're going to review different television shows, movies, video games, what's trending, and whatever is on our minds.
We're just a couple of bros that want to try to spend some time together in a different kind of format and enjoy each other's companies, at least sometimes. Sucker. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and get into our first episode, which is covering a very broad topic, but we're going to try to narrow it down to just season 5 of Stranger Things, because you can't really omit the whole first part of the first 4 seasons, because I think it's huge, but we're just going to really get into the meat of season 5 here. And so we're going to kind of just cover it by main kind of plot reviews and character developments and stuff. But at first, I'm going to go ahead and get into the story plot. My biggest thing is, in general, I kind of liked it. And I don't think that's things I've seen where people did like it. But, I mean, the ending, I think 11 Living was actually really, really cool. I think a lot of people didn't like it because by that notion of how it was done, you have Will not knowing whether or not she lived or died or what happened. This was off and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's how fucking life is. You don't know how life ends. You don't know what happens to everything. And I was like, that, if anything, is more realistic than another alternative where Will finds out and they live happily ever after again. I'm okay that it doesn't end like that, if you ask me. I mean, how are you feeling?
I mean, 3 waterfalls, bro. 3 waterfalls.
Listen, you don't need 3 waterfalls to be happy. It'd be fucking cool.
I mean,
but
that's true. I mean, I love how they did break it up in between the different holidays. I thought that was a cool aspect for hyping it up. But the finale, I'm kind of torn about it, honestly, Kev, because there was definitely inconsistencies in the final episode, but it left it open for interpretation where it could go like 3 different potential endings, because you obviously had Vecna, who died in like less than 5 minutes, getting his head chopped off, but then there was inconsistencies where the graduation, their colors were green. And in there, it was orange in the actual finale. They talked about, like, there's obviously fan theories out there where they're talking about how their haircuts and stuff, with the family is looking like Vecna, and they're all sitting like they were basically sitting at the actual table with all the kids with Vecna. So there's a little bit of things like that where the ending could be interpreted where you are still actually in Henry's view or Vecna's view of how things played out, and they're in his mind as far as things. But then there's also where
But don't you think that's just a byproduct of our society overanalyzing and scrutinizing every single detail versus it could just be that way? I think that's something you can't get away from. Is everyone's like, oh, it was this color, that color. Oh, it was up, not down. It was left, not right. I'm like, why can't you just see it as a general kind of viewpoint of, okay, this is it. We want to overanalyze it. But that's the thing, is I think creators, developers, they know that they can leave subtle details of that. And if they ever wanted to, it provides that. But then we've seen so many movies and shows in the past where, like, how many times have Michael Myers died? Like, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden he's alive again. You know what I mean? Like, they can do whatever they want and recreate something else. So even if his shirt was gray instead of white, and then they were orange instead of green. What are we doing here? Like, everyone, like, even going back to other shows and stories, like, I don't think all these creators have thought like 400 years in advance of what can happen. And I think we just as society want to believe that more than it may actually be.
So I'm not a better writer than the Duffer Brothers, is what you're saying, Kevin? But I know they took inspiration from John Carpenter and stuff like that. So the way they kind of wrote it, as far as the ending, does make sense if you're taking it from the perspective of like the 80s movies and stuff like that. So I certainly get it as far as that. And there is a lot of, like I said, fan conspiracies and stuff like that. I just felt like the ending was okay, it was good, but they could have gone next freaking level by having the episode 9. Did you see the countdown, Kev, on these fan
That's what I'm saying. Is like there's a conspiracy for everything. I think in my timetable of life, watching the next, to me, the only high level scrutiny of anything to this magnitude was Star Wars, both the sequel and the prequel series.
No, Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones was one season. I'm talking about 3 different movies over scrutinized before and after. I'm sorry, 6 different movies if you remember the prequels. I said overly. I didn't say that they weren't overly scrutinized, because that nonsense was too. But the point being is, like, it can sometimes just be the end. And I don't think fans want it to be. But it could just be the end, and it might not be what they love, and that's just what it is. So I like the idea of how it ended. I would be okay potentially if they would have done the whole extra episode afterwards, but I don't want to see a spin-off in another year or two. I think that you lose, like, that's why I think this season, like, was so far delayed from the release of the other ones, whereas in the initial couple seasons were tied together, it just lost steam. You lose the feel of it, and that part was deflating. But season 5 in its overall, I was like, I liked the story. I thought it was relatively fine.
Yeah. And that brings me to, it's definitely been very controversial, right? Like, again, when they had the episode initially with, it was the Christmas Eve episode, I think was episode 7, where Will came out being gay. And that was very controversial. And a lot of people were like let down and like, oh my God, this was such a big thing. And I was one of those people too. However, what changed is the more I thought about it, though, you have to look at what time period this is supposed to be taking place in the 80s, right? Today's generation, we're not in the 80s, we're in 2026, right? So again, it's a lot different coming out in 2026 versus the 80s. So I was part of that, a lot of those fans out there, they're like, oh my God, him coming out is, that is such,
I don't think that's the problem, though. I think the problem is, like, obviously being gay versus not being gay is a huge topic in this country at all times, and is evolved over time since, it really becoming a social norm starting in the 80s. But I think it's not the problem that somebody is that. I think it's the ordeal that was made out of it. And then you get, and that gets into a dicey line of wokeness versus, non-wokeness, I guess, and we've definitely seen that fair share of it. And it's like, is that really a huge part of needing that as an element for the story? And I think that's where people get upset, is people are defining characters by the sexuality, and it shouldn't be the main part and component of that. Now, like you said, it did take place at that time period, but that was supposed to be the ultimate straw that led him to overcome and be different. And I think for someone like me is, if we get into more character stuff, like, that is an issue. But no, you're right. Having some of these topics back then were huge, but I think the storyline itself was generally fine. I mean, there's stuff I didn't like, in particular, like Karen Wheeler walking around after being in the hospital, barely dying. She had to be on life support because she couldn't breathe. Yet she was able to go to a whole different floor, walk around with an O2 tank. Have you ever lifted one of those? Even those small ones. Have you ever lifted one of those that are supposed to be full?
They're pretty heavy, but maybe she got. Like, I know those NFL players get those steroids before playing games, Kevin. So
she was not doing steroids because she would have smaller boobs. So let's be honest. All right, that's how that works.
Yeah, those things are pretty heavy because I remember working at I think a Meijer back in the day, and we had to fill balloons, and those things are like.
Now those are the big ones. Those are the big ones, though.
Okay.
All right, but the small ones. I had an ex whose grandpa had to walk around with an O2 tank. So you're talking about an O2 tank, and I remember you have to pick those things up, and if they're full, they have to drag them around on carts. Yeah, that's how they have. And you're talking to this mom who's barely breathing, this scar, is walking around dragging this thing, and then has the power quietly, mind you, if you remember the Demogorgon dogs were eating these things up quietly, put it in there so nobody noticed, turn this thing on. I'm like, oh, I saved the day. No, you didn't. You lied to me, you goddamn creators. That I do have a huge, that's not believable. Like, that's an element, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't have somebody saved. That's a great creative way to kill the Demogorgons, but it shouldn't have been her, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm a parent. You're a parent.
This is true.
And protecting your children, you will go at all costs, and you will get an adrenaline rush if you feel like they're in dangers. So, I mean, listen, there is some plausibility.
I don't deny that, but I'm not buying that product. All right, it's just I'm not feeling like you couldn't hear this giant tank being dragged on the ground. She would have been eaten halfway in that room by the Demogorgon dogs. Like, yeah, it's like so. Like, there's elements like, but that to me is a small element. Like another big thing I didn't like, or at least maybe I'm just ignorant and didn't make sense. Is all right. So here's the thing. So at first, I didn't understand how the upside down was upside down, and now all of a sudden it's not, okay? And then it's fine. It's a straight, like they literally drove through and then we're on the streets of the upside down. I don't remember when the upside down started being that. Maybe I just don't remember that detail. Okay, that's fine. I'll even buy that. So here's the weird thing. So even if it's a straight, in this wormhole, right? You're going into this wormhole into the upside down. All right, so they're the same level playing field, even though if you look at the wormhole, it's like on top of it, right? All right, so then this is top side up, this is top side up, yet the upside down doesn't have like a wormhole. If you think about how I've ever seen it in anything, it's supposed to be like a bending, right? So if this is going top side, this is now all of a sudden top side. How come this is top side? So basically, when they go to the abyss, how come they go through the ground? It's in the all of a sudden it's in the air, the sky of the upside down versus shouldn't it be flipped, right? Shouldn't the abyss and earth be basically polar opposites? Not their sky is our sky. It's like two parallel. I don't know. To me, that didn't kind of make sense. Not that I know much about how it's supposed to be if they're just talking about wormholes, but I thought like wormholes, like it's almost like the straight line, you bend it. And then it's like this part, the top part is the floor of one is the ceiling of the other. Where in this, it was showing the ceiling. I don't know. Maybe I'm.
It's because you don't play D&D, Kev. That's all it is.
That could be it. So
no, but I'll think in a sense too, which this is kind of the first thing that came to my mind, analogy wise, is it's not exactly the same, but like Stargate in a sense. Obviously that's going through an actual Stargate, but yeah, as far as I don't need. We can talk about this in a future episode as far as like planes of existence and stuff like that. But yeah, like I understood.
But that's like I guess the way they are showing the diagram didn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
versus
like a funnel.
But at the same time, once again, the upside down was the upside down. So now it's not. So is it like that's where the element is being lost? Is that there to me that was a little bit of consistency, but maybe it's just something I don't understand.
Yeah, to kind of make a simple analogy, at least the upside down, related to D&D aspect of things. It's essentially a mirrored, like, darker version of, like, our world, essentially, is probably the easiest way to, like, that it's kind of explained in D&D.
But that's the thing, is why is it just of our world? It's connecting to the abyss. Because shouldn't it have the abyss world too? Like, I mean, I'm really getting deep diving into this, exactly. Obviously, that content. But just in general, I like just the way, like, I thought something should be the opposite. The mirror, right? The mirror isn't, it's an exact replica, but it's the opposite. Yet things have changed, and that's what okay, maybe it changed, that's fine, but now you're telling me it's a wormhole, which creates another element that just, I don't know, like,
this is where your science background is coming into play here.
I didn't love it, right? So, but like, outside of that, I think another thing I didn't like about it, is the Callie, the 8 chick, right? This is something, like, I was fine with her making the false representation of 11 and her going away, right? I didn't like how it happened, though, because she was in a totally different place. She was wounded, which would limit her powers, and then she's supposed to know exactly how to make a representation of 11 in a place she's not at, or potentially he's never really been, and then that's supposed to be a thing. That, to me, was a larger leap than the Karen Wheeler throwing the thing in there. Like, that is like, get out of here. That's like miles down the road. They were driving in the truck miles down the road, and they're just like, yeah, that's my projection. She's there. She's dying, and you can't see the real one. Like, no, that to me doesn't. It would make sense if she faked her death, right? She faked her death. She was lying there. 11's like, oh, she died, and she followed them on the truck, and then was on the truck with them, and then her and 11 escaped together. That would make more sense to me. But the only problem is, I think they wanted her to die. Unalight yourself. I'm sorry, I hate that. No, she died, and so and that's fine. But I think they wanted 11 to be by herself. But I could see a world where 11 would have been alive with her. They would have been like friends running. Like, that does kind of make sense. But the whole projection that far away, wounded, I don't love it.
And this is part of the things of the inconsistencies I was kind of referencing earlier that I didn't necessarily care for. Like, yes, they fought, like, for example, the Mind Flayer before, in, what was it, season 3 or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
And so again, would they be prepared to fight, obviously, the Mind Flayer again, and kind of know that, and be able to easier be able to take them down? Yes, I can see that. But then, like, for example, as far as with 11, again, that's where one of the inconsistencies come. When she was in the portal, she nosebleeds every time she uses her powers. In this, she was being projected by Kali, as far as that's what everyone's saying, and you couldn't see 11's, obviously, nosebleed, so, like, that's a mirage, that was an illusion, And then, like, you have the whole military aspect of this, and Hopper's going back to being a good old, sheriff in the freaking town and stuff like that, but, like, you're telling me the military didn't get involved after, like, 100 of these soldiers got killed? Like, come on, what is going on here?
Yeah, I think there's a gap of, like, what happened. I killed the government
18,
a bunch.
Exactly. There was 18 months that passed or whatever, so, and, like, half of the finale episode was basically telling the ending of the actual story, so the last episode, like, again, I understand how they ended with the characters, and like I said, they left open a lot of open, like, loopholes like that, and that's where I'm just like, it was fine, but it didn't kind of, like, blow me away. And I guess you could not make every audience happy as far as how you do that, which is understandable. It was like, meh. It was mid to me. All
right. On that note, in general, I think we should, we're going to vote with this sort of thumbs up, thumbs down. I mean, in general, how would you, as this show would pertain with the storyline plot, how would you rate this? All right. We're going to stick our hands out here, put it in the middle, and then we'll make a decision. So whenever you're ready.
I'm gonna have to go.
All right, ready? And 3, 2, 1. I would go thumbs up.
I'm gonna go mid. I know you liked the ending more than I did, but
that's fine. All right. I mean, so as far as that goes, that will lead us into our next one, where we can go into some more of the characters. All right. I think the hottest topic, as you were alluding to, was Mr. Will and coming out. It was its lowest rated episode. And
I don't even know what it was rated.
It was.
I know there's a lot of backlash online about it.
And see, you have to. That means to me, everyone is kind of viewing it differently based upon their life, right? So you're talking about some people, are hardcore liberal or hardcore conservative, and you're always going to have an element of that. But like I said, I think it's just they were trying to define it as the element to put it over the edge, and I think that is what, to me, was a lot of viewership had an issue with. And not only that, it was like the scene at the time it was meant to be so pivotal, and to be like that annoyed me, like, because it was trying to come off as over the top, like what happened with the other girl that was, I don't even remember her name at the moment, but she came out secretly, to what's his name, Steve, and it was like, oh, I'm gay, basically. And there was a moment, but it wasn't the pivotal supposed to make Will over the top. And I think there's a level of fatigue that's happening in this country that is coming out, which is honestly, I think, part of the reason why it was as rated as low as it was. But at the same time, like, it felt unnecessary, and that's really what it was to me. I didn't hate it. It's just like, it was, I'm over it. I guess I have some of the fatigue too. So I think that was a drawing point that I think need to try to move on in defining characters by their sexualities. This isn't a show that was defined by that. This show, its character arc should have, and this is where I had a huge issue, is it should have been focusing again on Eleven and her relationship, or maybe lack thereof, with Will. That was the hugest thing in season 1, and they went away from that more. Like they ended it the way they did, like Will was yearning for her, and they show that he didn't know, and that's fine. The problem is, you didn't even know they existed together in any sort of romanticism throughout the whole season. Not even one episode to the other. I think that's where they were really lacking, and should have focused more of their time on that.
Yeah, and I think what you were referring to was Robin.
Robin,
she was
that's
coming
it.
out to the red-haired girl. About her sexuality.
They had more of her relationship with her than they had of Will and Eleven.
Yeah. And did you see that meme with Eleven and Will, and it shows her being pregnant and stuff? And again, I think that ending, obviously, even then would have satisfied everyone if they had going to the 3 waterfalls. But I think that was... I did like how that story aspect ended, where 11 going away made the most sense, because I feel like the military would have kept hunting her down.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And that would have not ended. They would have had to flee. They couldn't stay in Hawkins.
So I had a suspicion that maybe somehow she reached Will privately, and Will had to, like burden himself with the secret that he couldn't let anyone know, or something like that. I initially thought that could be happening, but when I saw her and the way it was told, he just had to live in like this sense of he doesn't know, but he's always going to wonder. And that's the thing, is like, but I think that led and transitioned well with his life as a writer and showing some creativity, like with him typing and stuff. So I like that element, I guess, a lot, because like I said, I feel like that's how life is. We don't always have a super nice life. Like they're not always going to get married and have a billion kids with a white picket fence. That's reality. So that element to me is awesome, because it's realistic, and like I don't need them to be happily ever after to be satisfied with the ending. That was a good ending with them, I guess we could specifically say.
In regards to the rooftop scene, as far as them, that was controversial with people that I read, as far as seeing online too, because they were talking about how, as far as Steve and stuff like that was, the baseball coach, and instead he was supposed to be, what was the
other sport he played was basketball?
Yeah, exactly. So that was obviously different. They were also, Jonathan said he didn't want to be a drinker, and he was obviously drinking a beer and stuff like that, and how Robin didn't like wearing like nice fancy clothes and stuff like that, and then she was kind of wearing fancy clothes. So that rooftop scene, them getting together for future each month, I liked that. But as far as going against what the story was, again, alluding to in the earlier seasons, didn't make sense to me. It was like contradictory.
But here's the thing, all right? Whether it was Vecna or not, they are changed people. I think that's the point, right? They literally face the end of the world, the end of their lives constantly, and through a few years, they were basically on high alert. You know how much anxiety you'd have? So them to be able to finally feel like they can breathe, life changes a person to have to deal with stuff like that. So, yeah, maybe that wasn't the intent, but that's what happened. You know what I mean? So that element of the character arc for all of them, if they show these nuances of change and differences, I think that's okay. Like, it is maybe potentially weird, but I think there's an element of change. Like, it wasn't like he was a drunk on the rooftop. He was doing that, and even Nancy was talking about wanting to change things, right? Even so, it's like they had to do something to go through something, and then afterwards, like, okay, I'm doing something, but I think I'm going to change and go back. What was she talking about? I don't know. Going back to college or something like that.
I don't know, Kev, but we're survivors. We got through COVID. We got through Y2K. We got through the rapture. So, anyways.
All right, so I mean, I think if you want to do a flip side moment, right? I think my favorite character transition was when Nancy Wheeler turned into Rambo.
Oh my god.
That was hilarious. I was like, I don't know if this was I assume this was intentional, because there's no way she looked the way she did and people didn't know, oh yeah, you look just like Rambo. Was that supposed to be an element of like this is a show of power or force because it was the 80s? Like, there's no way it was coincidence. No way.
I got so many issues, because how did them being in another plane of existence in the abyss, they all need to turn into Olympic athletes to be able to climb all these mountains, to be able to hurt the Mind Flayer? That part, I know it's one of those things where the believability, but I'm just like, all right, really? Like, come on. So.
Yeah, there's a sort of fantasy element, and that's the thing. As I was referring, it's like they're trying to outdo what they did previously. They don't have to. Like, these kids are supposed to be growing. I can handle myself, Dad or Mom. Nancy, go settle down and get healthy. It's like, look, I get it. They are also becoming, like you're talking, the reality is they're supposed to be, seniors in high school, right? So physically they can do a certain element. However, they're also hardcore nerds. So let's not face like that isn't an element that, yeah, they aren't physically peak forms. You know what I mean? So I think with that sense that, yeah, they can't do and probably shouldn't be able to do some of that. But at the same time, I think overall they are leaning into the fantasy element. So I'm okay with it to a degree. But yeah, like Nancy is all of a sudden a sharpshooter, with every single gun that's ever been made. And I'm like, all right, the Rambo it is. So I find that completely, like, I could not look at her. I'm like, this is literally First Blood happening right now.
Oh my God. That's the one thing the dynamics of some of the characters and the growth, like, again, I loved the speech that Dustin did as a remembrance to Eddie, as far as talking about us being all outcasts and stuff like that, and then coming together, whether you're nerds, jocks, that sort of thing. I loved that throwback, and then how he was getting so closer to Steve as far as off and on, obviously them bickering like brothers and stuff like that, and I loved the kind of dynamic of the
more
characters.
Like marriage by the end of it.
More like marriage, yeah, basically. So,
but okay, so here's another element. Once again, I was going on about the issue with 11 and Will. What about Will and Nancy? Right? Like, they are brother and sister. There was a big scene a couple seasons ago where they're like, I always got your back. Were they even in the same scene really together? Like, they were rarely, like, they went away. And I guess you want to try to focus on developing other characters. I just felt like the main characters weren't really focused on. It was all these peripheral ones. Was it because of they wanted to show those developments or something? Or were they like, okay, we already covered that, so let's move on to the next relationship? It just never seemed like they interacted really ever after that.
Yeah, that's a good point. They did. I mean, they have so many characters, so developing all the different plot points over the seasons and stuff like that, it's yeah, it's because you even saw the relationship with with Jonathan and Nancy obviously developing the freaking the sludge scene, and they're about to die, and they're basically confessing their love to each other and stuff, and then
but it was like the I love you but I don't love you.
yeah, that was like
it was kind of weird
because they didn't end up together, I think, when they were talking in the rooftop scene, so that was weird. And then you had obviously Hopper and Joyce and stuff like that.
That was my favorite.
So that
was my favorite.
And I love that. Not only that dynamic of them getting together, but also the parenting aspect of Joyce and Will's dynamic, but also Hopper and Eleven, and how you trust and how you're like, you need to let go, and you know what I mean? So I loved seeing kind of that play into things, because it's like, again, we're both parents, so it's like we see sometimes you have to give your kids tough love, you know what I mean? And sometimes you have to kind of, let them spread their wings and fly a little bit. So.
But see, that's the crazy thing is, those have been relationship dynamics since the beginning, and they didn't leave those. Yet, they left the other relationships and stopped covering those. And it's like, that's my point, is like, I think they should have covered a little bit more of those dynamics than, maybe like somebody's sexuality, which was never really a big key part of the show. So that's where I'm just like, I need you guys to hone this in on. And they just didn't, which is why it felt lackluster for character development. Not just with them and all. But I will say one I did kind of like the interactions of, is they kind of got to the open air of it, was the Jonathan and Steve interaction, where just like, I don't like you, I don't like you, and I'm like, all right, we're good, and I'm like, okay, I can respect that, but at the same time, like, I feel like if that's the case, like oh, I don't want you to, but I don't want you to die, but I feel like they would have hated each other more. I feel like there would have been a little bit still like edge to the relationship, but it is what it is, right? They did survive. They were fine with each other just from a distance. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. But I just like how they kind of broed out for a little bit there towards the end.
True. And one of the things I think, again, not just looking at chapter 5 or season 5 of Stranger Things, the villains that they had in the seasons between Dr. Brenner and like Vecna and Linda Hamilton being introduced to the cast, like I didn't see that coming, and that was, she was a badass as far as that. So like I definitely have loved like their characters and stuff like that and their stories.
Yeah, I think Vecna's character was actually pretty awesome. At the end, I still feel a little lost with how. Like, I had to look up the story and the plot line a little bit to see how the character came about, because it originally felt like, to me, they were saying Henry had the powers from the beginning. That's what they were showing. He had this power, I'm going to make things move and control things when he was a kid, which led to his him
finding that rock or whatever.
But you didn't know that until this season. That's my point.
That's true.
So you were under the impression he had the powers, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, he kind of got the powers from this rock, which is fine. But the problem is, like, that for that character to develop, like, how did that rock get there? That's, I guess, more storyline stuff. But okay, so he gets the bond. He connects to the mind flare, and it just kind of grows from there. So I'm fine with his character arc as far as that goes. It's kind of weird that scene is the scene that he did not want to go over into the cliffs. I feel like that, him killing somebody at such a young age, if he was as sadistic as he was kind of weird that was the moment. If anything, I would think it was the opposite. Like him somebody trying to love him, like a previous love that was killed or something might be more of a factor that pushes him over to just stay with the dark side than anything, but like his first kill, I guess, might have been one of those things. I guess maybe that moment, if he truly embodied the mind flayer and being evil, that would have been like a high point, right? Like,
I think it traumatized him so much to the point where, again, he used a freaking rock in such a young age and killed, somebody. So, I don't think, obviously, again, before that, he actually, obviously he didn't have the powers until he actually grabbed that. So, like, again, it's definitely interesting as far as how that, the mind flayer manipulated him to a sense, but that was after he got the briefcase and stuff. So yeah, like maybe they'll explain that a little bit more in the what cartoon animation series, which is supposed to take place between I believe season 2 and 3. But
you know what? That's what they did. They didn't explain it, and that was one that you do intentionally. If you look at other movies and series out there, it's okay not to have always the answer, because sometimes when you get the answer, you don't like the answer. Like, not to go deep into another thing, but Alien, when they find out about the creators, a lot of people were unhappy. So they got an answer, but then you were left kind of like, oh, you don't have answers for where's the creators? What happened to them? You need more info there. So it's like, they're like, look, it came from this rock. That's where we're at. And that's all you need to know for right now. And people are like, oh, spin off for a prequel series and all this other like, there's an element which I think that it does happen. Like this ending thing that we talked about. Like, there are some character developments you could still continue with. Like, who's to say 11 never goes back and finds Will? They've kind of alluded to that by the way they've written it. But once again, I told you, Michael Myers has been alive so many times. Like, they could spin it to where, hey, all of a sudden, he was writing this in between. She stopped and said hi, and blah blah blah, and he met her, and like he's seen her in her dreams, and she's talking to him telepathically. There's so many angles they could take on how to spin it off that they wanted to. They just, you got to kind of end something at a point. They ended it on a relatively, as you'd say for most characters, a high note, and I think that was the goal. But if you want to call it Easter eggs they left in there with like some of the gray elements, okay, or I even think I remember seeing a turn signal was like an arrow was red and then it was gray. It's like, are we really just saying, oh, that's it? Or can it not just be an overanalyzation? It could be both, but either way, it is end right now. So to me, I don't get deep. I try to take it at face value. But these characters not developing, or at least giving us a little bit more in angles I think they could have or should have. It's just one of those things where I think they left some on the table.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Again, this is where, some of the plot points, some were kind of closed out better than others, right? Like I said, the military, like I mentioned earlier, them kind of, they're just going away. They're not going to do anything after 100
no big deal.
People.
Just kill a bunch of hundreds of our guys. We're okay
it was
with
also weird, like, there was no demogorgons or bats or anything, like, in the abyss as far as that. They had the Mind Flayer and obviously Vecna, and then again, he got killed so quickly, but it was one of the other things where it's like, they all work together and they kind of faced the Mind Flayer before, so they're kind of going to a situation like that, but like, yeah, so it's, like I said, some things I think they wrapped up fine. Other things, they did things better in some cases, but then in other cases they left like too many, I feel like, things not wrapped up and stuff like that. So.
All right, so on that note, on a rating system of thumbs up or thumbs down, all right, let's see, where you at?
As far as like character
development, where you at?
I'm gonna go up this.
So I give that a thumbs down. So, but that's okay. That's the element here. So I mean, let's kind of keep going with this and transition into another element. This is kind of one of my least favorite topics most of the time. But if you want to take a look about like music and sound, right? This in general to me does not have a huge appeal to almost most situations, most movies, most shows, and everything, because it's mostly just some background noise. sometimes there's a huger element, huger, I don't even know if that's right, a bigger element. But for me, I think in general, it was just meh. But I can say, at least for sound, as far as soundtracks, the 80s songs were hitting hard.
Dude, that's true. Running Up That Hill, you got obviously Metallica, you got, you know what I mean? You got Purple Rain in the end, like, plus you have the iconic theme song for this, like, yeah, I mean, as far as, like, ambient music and stuff, I don't remember anything like that, but, like, even, like, the clock sound, you know what I mean?
Yep.
I was one of those conspiracy theorists. I watched the countdown for episode 9, and I got
did not.
So, you know, but again, yeah, so, I mean, if I'm just having to base it off that, I'm throwing thumbs up all day.
Mine's,
So,
all right, with the thumb rating, I'm going to do an angle like a 45 up. That's, it's like a 45 up. Like, I liked it.
The fact that they got all this music in there, like
I said, it's not a huge element most of the time, but when it is significant in a case like this, yeah, I'd say it's definitely a positive for overall as far as that goes. Which obviously, if you like hearing, you also might like viewing, right? So, for visual special effects, I think this was actually kind of on the better side. I thought the Mind Flayer, although it didn't get nearly as much attention as it did in previous seasons, I thought his design was actually really cool. I really enjoyed it. I thought the look was pretty cool. It was like keeping the same style, the same elements, but being more of a different kind of physical look than we saw in the previous. You know, like it was like this black cloud of smoke at certain times, and then he had actual physical form with the one brother. But like this is where it was like it was the actual manifestation of the Mind Flayer, because it was in the abyss. It wasn't a transitioning or a projection or anything like this. Was it in almost its full form with Vecna, and I just thought it was kind of a cool crane looking kind of like arachnid kind of thing that we've seen, and it was a physical form. And I even thought the visual of how Vecna was inside of it to just embody the element of a whole unit of them, even though they're different entities. Just like I said, that whole scene, it was like the brain, even though it wasn't in the head, it was like the brain, the heart of it. I thought that visual cool. I thought the Abyss was a really cool visual. I mean, the Upside Down was always cool. So I like that. I thought the military kind of taking over the downtown was really cool in general too. And even utilizing the Upside Down element, because then it can't be tracked even by Russians, even though they weren't really an element at all anymore in this story. But I just thought it was visually, I was pretty happy with the effects too. The explosions of the dark matter too. Oh man, like to me that. Like, you get an element of physics, which even though I suck at physics, I love science. So seeing that aspect of it was super cool. And seeing how it was melting and they didn't have an answer at times, which is a question of how come it did melt sometimes, but that's a different element. Just like I said, the visuals in general, I thought were pretty sweet.
Which to me, that is so fascinating with you obviously having that experience and that depiction of it, because again, traditional D&D lore for like the Demogorgons and Mind Flayers, they're not actually depicted like that based off the D&D lore. So if I'm just basing it off of them being true to D&D, I feel like my experience was going to be different. However, I actually enjoyed them having and tweaking a little bit how they actually look, because Mind Flayers in traditional D&D are more similar to, having like a squid or octopus type face like Cthulhu and stuff like that. But in in Stranger Things, they had it, again, a manifestation, like you said, in a giant arachnid creature, just like the Demogorgon in D&D lore. They're giant, basically, demons that have, like, two heads that are, like, baboon faces, and they have, like, giant tentacle arms and stuff like that. So, again, different depiction, where in Stranger Things, they're a humanoid creature with like essentially a flower face with giant, obviously, claws for hands and obviously a mouth with like fangs where they can kind of eat you. And then Vecna is traditionally like how Vecna is in the actual game. So I liked how they kind of change that up and use obviously D&D. They play D&D and stuff like that in there. But the depictions of how they did that, I don't think they did a bad job at it. I think they did it really well, but kind of did it in their own creation or in their imagination as far as how they did that. And I definitely agree with you, again, how they did as far as how they actually visually looked really freaking awesome, along with the Abyss and the Upside Down. The Upside Down was, again, like a mirrored version of that, and I thought that was cool. Even like the rips in the gate and stuff like that, and how all these portals are opening up. It was just visually stunning. Like, it was just so cool.
I mean, I'm sure their budget was up there, so they better be freaking cool, right? Like
True.
They spent a lot of money on this CGI stuff, but it wasn't bad CGI, so you can always say, yeah, when you can't tell it's CGI as much, generally it's good, right? So, on that note. So, I mean, we're on a thumbs rating. Where you at, my guy?
Dude,
where you at?
Dude, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would say if you're a really visual guy or gal, I would say it's definitely a good way to go visually. So
yeah, and the editing, I think the storytelling of that, I think was really well. Just again, overall through all the seasons for the most part, and the build up, as far as kind of leaving you on a cliffhanger a lot of times to kind of build up the next episode.
All right, so. If you wanted to, or if you could, like, how would you feel, would you rewatch this? Are you connected? Are you emotionally invested? Is this something that is, like, I'm going to show my kids, like, over and over? Like, how do you feel in an element of, like, would you watch this again?
Yeah, I definitely would watch it again. I think it was so relatable for me because, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so, and
old bird over there.
Yeah, so you grew up in the 80s too, but like, they had, they had so much throwbacks and nostalgia, and they just did everything just so well. So, and again, their storytelling for the most part, again, ties into the emotional connection where you got behind these characters and stuff like that. I mean, they start off these basically a group of ragtag kids. I mean, I'm sure you remember us growing up, Kevin. We would grab our bikes and go to our friend's house, be home before the lights come on, type of thing, before phones and all this, jazz came about.
I don't remember that. Vecna took me over, so he created things. It's not real. No, I'm with you. Like, growing up in the era we did is always going to be unique. You got that Goonies feel, the kids just putting together, doing that. Now, we're in the 5th season now. But in general, I'm not watching just season 5, right? I think we're all watching the whole show, right? So if you're doing that, we'll go ahead and say, would I watch it again? Yes. I'm not just watching season 5. I think it does lose steam towards the end. I didn't go back and rewatch the first seasons before this. Like, I do feel like as a viewer of shows, if you can watch all of it all at once, you're doing the best. And that's the hard thing is shows can't keep coming out and keeping your viewer happy. Like, there are shows I've watched where I binge the first 3 or 4 seasons. They have 8 seasons total, but by the time the 6th, 7th, 8th, they're not out yet. You start losing the interest. The steam is not there. That's not the show's fault. It's just a byproduct, I think, of being a viewer. Like, the first 3 seasons of Stranger Things, they were awesome. They were top notch. The story, everything. And then look at the last 2 seasons, how long it took to do them, how long it took to come out. They lost steam, and I think that paid a toll to the fandom. We wanted it, but we wanted it 4 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing that it doesn't mean it's necessarily totally bad. It just means, you're getting it at a different point of your life. As a viewer, you're unique to the time period you're now. If you watch movies that are created in the 80s, I try to show my kids that have been watching other things they're gonna walk in like, this is dumb. This is lame. Like, it doesn't have the viewer appeal. But if I watch it, I am a kid again, and I'm like, this is awesome. So I think there's just an element you can't lose with that, and that's why it's going to be unique to everyone. In general, I'd say you can rewatch it. You're good to rewatch it. It's just you're gonna want to watch it from start to finish as a whole. If you break it up, you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose steam. You might lose interest. So, I'm generally not a quitter. So if I start a show, I'm finishing it. But
so Kevin's the one who binge watch it in like a week or 3 days.
Oh, you wouldn't? Whatever. So
I probably took off work to watch some of it. So.
Okay, then just making my point. So on a thumb rating scale, bro, where you at?
Yeah,
I'm gonna go up.
Yeah,
I think you're definitely one of the better shows in a small crunch. You know, even if you're feeling a little lackluster at the end. I mean, just leading overall, that's rewatchability. But overall, I think that's where we're at. You know, I think you got a thumb rating of you're up. You want to watch a good show. Realize there's flaws to it, but what show doesn't have that? You know what I mean? I think this season, you know, left you potentially wanting more. There's so much spin-off opportunity if you want to, even though I don't always love spin-offs. Sometimes you get really good stories that can come out. Sometimes you get duds. I do think there's just, you know, still a lot of meat on the bone if they want it, but I'm okay if it ended the way it did too.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see how the behind-the-scenes episode is supposed to be coming out. I think it's on the 13th, and then how they're going to be doing, or what's the animation series between 2 and 3, if that's going to fill in any other holes for anything that people are thinking and stuff like that. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, as far as an overall rating, I'm gonna go give a thumbs up overall. I definitely think it's worth watching and seeing that. But you know, this is you know, our first episode of recording this for the Louchen Bros podcast. So it's something me and Kevin, we talk about this stuff just on the random all the time. So now we're actually just kind of recording it. So,
and you know, of course, I'm always right and Brian's always wrong. My opinion is definitely better, but it's just been a ability for us to enjoy each other's company and just basically record these conversations we like to have, and you know, just, you know, fight sometimes verbally as we need to.
Never.
But it's a hopeful goal to keep enjoying, and, you know, hopefully people out there like to hear our nonsense.
Yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. You know, if you've enjoyed listening to our podcast, you know, please support these nerds, you know, by subscribing.
Nerd alert. Subscribe, please.
All right. See you later.
See ya.